Welcome to the world of Lurnex. Today we're stepping inside best practice, and I'm joined by a whole host of people from IMV. It's not the whole team. I'm assured there's lots and lots of people working at IMV, but it does feel like there's a lot of people here. So we're going to go around the room, and we're going to start with Sam. Please introduce yourself, Sam, and then you're going to pass off to one of your colleagues, and we're going to get everyone to give a quick introduction.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sam. I'm the clinical and applications team manager at IMV Imaging. So my job is overseeing the team of clinical managers who run our company's education. And I also do quite a bit of teaching and learning material creation myself as well. I'll hand over to Amy as she's part of our clinical team as well.
Hi everyone, my name's Amy. I've been with IMV for 4 years. I love teaching and I love imaging, so it's the perfect job for me. And I work on Sam's team creating educational content and teaching vets, nurses and students in a range of situations. I'll hand over to Marie.
Thanks very much. I'm Marie. I'm a radiographer by clinical background. I have a master's in medical ultrasound and in business. I've worked in sort of NHS clinical practices and imaging companies over about 10 years. For IMV Imaging, I'm an account manager where I support the clients across the sort of south of the UK, practices of all sizes, and enjoy supporting animals of all sizes as well. So I'll hand over to Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm a vet by trade, and I love looking at where clinical excellence and kind of business kind of meet. For me, that's like the sweet spot on things. And so, yes, I head up our UK account management team, making sure that all practices are getting all they need and all the imaging support in kind of all aspects, I suppose.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for all joining today. I'm really interested to find out more about what you do. I'm not from a clinical background, as you may know. We're business consultants who are 18 months into our journey working with veterinary practices. So I'm going to be learning more than everyone else on this call today. So we're going to start with Marie. For anyone who thinks IMV is just about selling equipment, what kind of things might surprise them about what you do with IMV day to day?
I think the surprise is that we're often initially known for sort of imaging sales, which is part of the name. But although we absolutely do sell equipment, it's only one string to the bow that we have as IMV with practices. We like to see ourselves more as the long-term imaging partner where we sort of collaborate on solutions holistically from both clinical and commercial point of view. So from the day to day, we work closely with practice teams to understand their clinical goals, the sort of workflow and pressures, and have that kind of meaningful, strong element of clinical education and training to give a whole imaging solution, not just equipment, and make sure that it works for practices of all different sizes. We even have, when I joined, I was even surprised that we even have like an in-house where we build, and bridge a gap of a product in-house that, is not sort of commercially available elsewhere. So that, we really do have different sort of areas of the market that we cover and the whole kind of portfolio of imaging that's developing more and more as we go. In terms of, we really want to kind of be that kind of bridge and provide more of a holistic way of rather than just a product to meet the needs of the customer. So rather than just a piece of equipment, we usually start with what are you going to be trying to achieve clinically and what does success look for like within the business. Ultimately, we want to be a bit more than just equipment, more about people and support and insight that we can provide.
Amazing. So we're going to head over to Sam now. In terms of confidence with imaging, how confident do you think the average vet or nurse genuinely feels with diagnostic imaging equipment? Is there a little bit of a gap here?
Yes, I mean, I think confidence varies hugely with individuals depending on their experience, the areas of practice that they work in as well. But one of the biggest challenges with diagnostic imaging in general is confidence. And it's one of the biggest barriers that we often find to people using imaging equipment effectively, or sometimes even at all. I mean, lots of people will probably empathize with the bit of imaging equipment where we've not got to see it, we've maybe not got to touch it, we know it's in a box somewhere, but then being asked to suddenly sort of use it at some point clinically can be really, really challenging. So is one of those, is probably one of the biggest barriers that people have. And one of the kind of comparisons I always like to draw people's attention to is if you are working in the human medical field, where they might have, for example, sonographers who perform imaging. It's not unusual that for some kind of areas of the body, let's see an ultrasound scan of a shoulder joint, they might be asked to have sort of a kind of achieve a level of competency that involves them scanning maybe 100 times, 200 times, something like that, to be considered kind of confident with it, competent with it. And then when we're in a veterinary situation, often kind of straight out of university, straight out of training placements, people are often expected to pick up imaging equipment and do examinations of much larger areas and much varied species with not a lot of necessarily having done it before. And there's often this expectation internally and externally that you can just do that. That's kind of part of what kind of being a vet or being a veterinary nurse is about. But the reality is that it takes that time. It takes time to understand how the equipment works. It takes time to understand the equipment that you have, and it takes time to kind of get that experience as well. So it's not surprising that confidence comes up as an issue, and it's one of the reasons why in IMV we have people like our clinical team who can provide that training and help people develop that confidence. That's really what we're here for, is to kind of help people deliver that knowledge, allow people to build that experience and build a foundation that they can use for the future as well.
Amazing. So in terms of other skills, I'm going to throw things over to Amy here. What are some of the obvious and maybe less obvious skills that people really need to develop when it comes to interpreting images or the workflows around imaging? What kind of skills do you feel people need to develop?
Well, I think in terms of workflow, I think most practices have got it fairly well set up. And it's normally because they're used to trying to perform these diagnostic imaging procedures day on day. And the nurses are often in charge of organising workflow. And that's something that they're absolutely awesome at. So that tends not to be a problem. But the gaps that we see, just as Sam said, are people not feeling that they know how to work their machine particularly effectively, because it's not as if in vet school you get taught how to use this brand of ultrasound machine, this brand of x-ray machine, this is how you perform a dental x-ray. It's all stuff you're expected to pick up when you're in practice, and that is an incredibly variable experience for people. Generally, we find that the knowledge gaps are how to perform a particular procedure. So with ultrasound, it's very much a case of how to position the probe, optimize the image, where you're going to find things. Image optimization driving the machine is a very important thing to know how to do, and it can underpin the value of everything that you do from that point onwards with regards to acquiring images. And I think the problem that we run into in veterinary is that you graduate as a very multi-skilled, multidisciplinary surgeon, medic, diagnostic imager, dentist, and you're handed an ultrasound probe, and to some degree you're expected to know how to use it and how to get the images. And it's not the case in the vast majority of situations. And unfortunately, if those people are then kind of thrown into a situation where they've got to use these skills that they've not had a chance to develop, it can kind of generate a bit of a diagnostic imaging aversion. And what we tend to see in practice too is that there's one person or two people that are the diagnostic imagers, so everything gets sent in their direction, and therefore there becomes a within practice skill gap. And that's something that we fix a lot through our provision of education.
So I'm going to throw this question over to Hannah. Things must have changed in terms of the equipment that you're putting into practices, and things that people have learned many years ago might not still be relevant. So where does education come in? And are there things that people might need to unlearn in terms of bad habits or things that were maybe relevant many years ago?
A fantastic question. I think one of the joys of actually veterinary medicine and technology, and particularly when they're both combined, is you're always learning. It's always evolving. We're always kind of growing. We're a whole team of geeks, I would say, particularly at IMV Imaging, but we embrace that and we love that as a profession. It's one of the joys of it. The principles of a lot of imaging is still the same. And I think actually it's the reverse is true. Like, we have a lot of technology really helps us. X-ray would be a fantastic example now about optimizing our image. But actually, going down to those fundamental principles that have been in place for, decades, about, getting the right exposure and things like that, they're just as important now, and thinking about like putting the right exposures in as they were back then. So actually, sometimes those keeping hold of those principles, even though we have a lot of things to help us now, that's very important to keep in mind. We're also very fortunate in the UK. We've got a very high standard of education, both for kind of veterinary degrees, nursing degrees. Our education CPD, we hold to a very high kind of standard. And although we get exposed to a lot of this and get taught in a very well, there's a lot of information to take on. Amy, Marie, and Sam and I spend our lives, our kind of working life is all in imaging, and we get to put that into practice every kind of day. And I think when you come out, when you graduate or you qualify, and by whichever means, you are qualifying in a whole range of different disciplines, in a whole range of different animals. Having that dedicated on the imaging, making sure that area that you're kind of confident and competent in is kind of very kind of important as such. And so it's just really staying back to those first principles, really, and forming those good habits and getting in that kind of way of working. So you almost like don't have to think about it. So yeah, I think that's really important.
So much changing in the world. I've always thought myself as an early adopter, someone who's able to, roll with new technology. But having children, I realize there's so much stuff I'm actually quite scared of at the grand old age of 42. So we'll head on over to Sam now. Sam, tell us something that the listeners and viewers are maybe not going to know already, because some of the stuff you're sharing here, I'm getting up to speed here. But tell us something a little bit surprising, a little bit unexpected around what's happening in the world of imaging right now.
Well, I think there's so much that's sort of interesting about it as well. But I think the sort of most exciting things is about how the technology evolves really as well, and you see that in lots of different imaging modalities. So whether we're talking about ultrasound or endoscopy, we're talking about a CT system or a radiography system, there's so much ways that the technology kind of jumps through it as well. And I think the interesting thing is always sort of think to us, and as Hannah mentioned, being a little bit geeky, is thinking about how that technology kind of works as well. And for me, what I love about imaging is just the physics of it, the kind of the technology that gets applied to it as well. So often as a vet, we maybe do these procedures and we don't necessarily have to always, but know or think about. But I think the kind of amazing thing about imaging is to just think about what is happening inside of these sort of systems as well. So if we take a radiography system, something that everybody uses all the time, what's actually going on there is you have a vacuum-filled tube with a cathode that gets charged, and thermionic emission boils an electron off its surface, and it's fired at an anode of tungsten, and then it interacts with the tungsten atoms on that sort of level to produce an X-ray photon, and that X-ray photon is fired out your kind of generator going into a sort of patient's tissue, and then maybe it hits atoms or electrons there and it's scattered or absorbed, or maybe it reaches your X-ray plate where it might interact with a photostimulable phosphor layer or a thin transistor film array, and eventually those things, either via light or straight to an electrical signal, create a kind of picture on a monitor of which another photon is kind of sent out, which is picked up by the retina in your eye and creates an electrical signal that you can process in your brain to see that shade of grey. Now, we don't necessarily need to know all of that bit, but I think just thinking about those parts that are happening is where the real fascination with imaging comes to me. Is just you're seeing with light that you can't visibly see, or you're imaging a part of an animal that with sound. You're kind of projecting sound in ultrasound into tissue and then gaining echoes back to create a kind of digital image that you can see that's updated in nearly real time, and you can see everything move. You can see the heartbeat and those parts are changing. So there's so much you can go into with the physics of it. And then from the way things change, just look at the way that AI and technology is being applied now to lots of areas of our lives. Lots of people will be using maybe Chat GPT. We hear a lot about things in the news. Is other kind of AI agents available, AI kind of large language models available. But we've also got these AI advances in medical imaging now as well, where you can use them to optimize parts of that process, whether it's right at the start, right through to the way the image is processed, and then the information that can be gathered and then sent out afterwards. So there's always these advances kind of coming. And I think that's the sort of fascinating bit as well. And I'm going to stop there, because if we start going into what's fascinating, I could continue talking about physics of different imaging modalities for quite a long time. So you probably don't want me to go in detail about CT and ultrasound, which I haven't done, or endoscopy. I could start talking about total internal reflection and fiber optic cables, but I won't do that just now. But I think that's what fascinates me, and I think that's what I'd probably ask people listening to think about, is just think about what you're actually doing with these kind of imaging equipment as well, because it's pretty amazing when you get down to it.
Sam, I found science really boring at school. I just wish you were my teacher, and I'd have probably gone down a complete different career path. It's great to hear your passion and energy, and it definitely affirms that you definitely have some geeks working at IMV. But that is a complete compliment, because I love the way you share your passion for what some people might just not understand. Some people might find mundane, but absolutely, it is incredible when you think about technological developments and how it can help clients, it can help pets, and it can help vets to do amazing work. So we're going to bring the tone down a little bit now. We're going to head to Amy, and we're going to think about some of the challenges and the pain points when it comes to imaging. What can go wrong, or what can be some of the blockers that stop the work from being done?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think every single practice will have pain points. And I guess, what do we mean by pain points? Well, we would describe it as being any kind of breakdowns or constraints in the imaging process. So that can be technology-wise, it can be patient-wise, it can be the imager. And we generally find that the imager can be a bit of a pain point. So people will feel a lack of confidence, they'll feel a lack of ability. There's also, I think, probably more of a pressure from clients nowadays. Their expectations are higher for what can be achieved. And I think everybody, to some degree, rightly expects gold standard, and that's not something that every single practice can provide all of the time. There's the sort of the thinking around context-specific care on the other side of the gold standard conundrum as well. So if we can kind of help with the lack of confidence, knowledge, and skills, there's also a lack of understanding of how somebody's diagnostic equipment actually works or can work to its best capability. But also, I think something that really sticks in practices is image saving, image management, image cataloging. So with X-ray, people are very much confined and regulated by the RPA, but when it comes to things like ultrasound, there's still a legal requirement regarding images, but people are not as sort of proactive or understanding about how important it is to look after images. And as Sam was referring to just now about technological advancements, image streamlining the management of it into cloud-based services and onto client records and all that kind of stuff has got so much better. Got some amazing cloud-based imaging management software now, PACS solutions, which are great. But yeah, in terms of pain points, as I said before, I think workflow is often very well taken care of most of the time, because the nurses run things and they're very, very good at it. But it is often, I don't feel that I'm good enough to do this investigation, or I'm not the best person to practice to do this. I don't have the time. I don't know how to work my equipment. My equipment isn't good enough. I don't know how to interpret these images. I'm not sure who to ask. The list really does go on, and a lot of that is education, but a lot of that is also equipment support as well.
Thanks, Amy. So I'm going to ask a question for a friend here, because I'm here very much to learn. What is a diagnostic imaging audit? I'm going to throw this one over to Hannah. And what role does that play within the importance of good clinical work?
Again, I just speak for myself, but when I used to hear the word audit, it used to put a pit of dread in my stomach. It feels very dry, quite daunting. Like somebody like, where's the adult in the room? Like they do the audits, like etc. And I think the thing with an audit, actually, I now find them incredibly fun. They're actually a really nice way to kind of really bring the practice together. I find it incredibly interesting to really delve into their imaging department and, as part of their business. It's the joyous thing about diagnostic imaging is I really do feel it's at the heart of any kind of clinic, because you use it not only to fix things when things are broken or in a bad place, but it's also used in kind of proactive management of things, like the EPIC heart study and things like that is one thing that springs to mind. It also crosses the barriers of surgery and medicine, and it's just and it applies to all of our different patients as well, whatever species they are. So really getting to grips with an audit, I think is a great thing. And essentially, you just approach it as we would any kind of logical, as a vet, veterinary professional, vet nurse, any kind of case workup. You just do it step by step. Start with step one. What equipment do you have? How old is that equipment? Has it been serviced recently? Can it actually function as a piece of technology? And then you look at it being like, who in the team is confident using the equipment? Who can set it up? Who knows how to maintain it? These steps that anybody can do in the practice beforehand. And then it's just working through how do I set up the equipment? How do I move around the equipment to get the best image? And by using which buttons to press. And then there's also, how do I get the best image by positioning the patient or positioning myself when I'm kind of moving a probe, etc. Other parts of kind of the audit to then look at is, how am I looking at these images are part of a patient's history, and we have a responsibility as veterinary professionals to look after that patient history by the RCVS standards, like the lifetime of that patient. Am I storing them in the right way? And also going back to that, we cannot know everything about everything. When I need to get some help and some support, do I know how to share that image with a specialist or a professional or a colleague to be able to get the right interpretation to then kind of feed into diagnostic kind of clinical kind of workup? And then if I'm confident in all of that, looking at kind of the practice, am I charging? What is this standard kind of rate for charging? And then in my team, do we all have confidence that we're giving value to our patients and to our clients, and therefore we can kind of charge appropriately? And I suppose the next layer, that's kind of, I suppose, a bit of an overview of a run through of what we do as an audit. Who's responsible for different stages? Do we have a bit of a backup as well? Is it all with that one person, or is there a few people that know the different bits? So that's all bits of an audit, but I completely appreciate it can be quite overwhelming and kind of daunting. And I think kind of what we're trying to show here during this chat is there are people out there you can go and reach out to. Marie and I and Sam and Amy, as well as our wider kind of teams, we're regularly in practices. We can have this conversation. We can start posing the questions. We can walk you through how to do this as that kind of whole partnership support wise.
Amazing. So I'm going to get Sam to share a bit more here, but I'm really interested in looking at a whole practice approach. Who needs to be involved in the workflow here to improve imaging across the whole practice?
Yeah, so I think a whole practice approach is one of the things that's key to real success with diagnostic imaging. So it varies a bit looking at the different modalities, because some of them have different sort of safety considerations, etc. So there's some where they've limited teams available, but a lot of the times the actual imaging kind of procedures touch everybody in the practice in some way. So it might be that what's happening at reception, when people are being booked in for imaging, who's doing sort of which procedures, and then kind of how those procedures are carried out. And we've already mentioned sort of afterwards what happens with the image management and then the kind of the recording of those and the delivery of results. So the imaging procedure will often go right throughout the practice as well. So when you're coming to looking at introducing a modality or changing one or really making it as sort of efficient for everybody as possible, it's great to take that whole practice approach and involve everybody in it, just so that people start to know and can learn from one another. A lot of the times in veterinary medicine and in medicine in general, sometimes there's often this it can be sometimes quite hierarchical. It can be like, this is this person's role, this is that person's role, and I don't need to understand theirs or they don't need to understand mine. But the real kind of magic happens when people do understand that kind of part of it. So we're looking and we're often talking about imaging training, we like to try to involve as many of the team as possible and sort of have that, let those discussions take place and give people that space to discuss and often reflect on kind of what they're doing and what they're trying to achieve. A lot of the times with some of the imaging procedures, one of the things that I like to discuss from a practice point of view is what is the outcome of it. With some imaging procedures, it's very, very sort of straightforward. We might sort of say, okay, well, this animal's here for a thoracic X-ray, and therefore we're going to take a dorsal-ventral view and a right lateral view, and people will say, we know what they're doing. There's a very clear process for that. We know who does it. We know where the kind of output of it is. But there's other imaging procedures where you look at it where they could be quite open-ended. So the example I always use for sort of practices is thinking about abdominal ultrasound, which is the classic one as well. People say this patient's here for an abdominal ultrasound exam, but that can mean completely different things to completely different people in the practice, and it can vary hugely practice to practice what it means as well. So often it's sort of thinking about your team-based approach is sort of, when something like this is happening, what is the outcome that we're going to have? And then it gets easier to start to understand maybe where the different forms of that exam are, how we want to charge for them, who works with who, how the reporting works, and then also fostering that sort of empathy and understanding as well. There's a huge amount that veterinary nurses can do and be utilised in doing some of these procedures. So it's something that it's well worthwhile thinking about upskilling the nurses, and they can help with it as well. So it's a real advocate with our training is sort of, let's get the nursing team involved, let's get the vets involved, let's start sort of fostering some of that understanding of the different roles, and then maybe we can think about the differences between a patient coming in for triage and needing an exam, and then maybe a more in-depth examination, or even sort of tiers or layers of those. So it's starting to think about that whole approach, but it varies a lot about the different modalities, and that's where kind of it comes to back, as with many things in kind of medicine and veterinary medicine, is that kind of word context as well. So it totally depends on the practice's context, and what we like to do as a company is try to take the time to understand what that is. So it's understanding what that practice's context is. What are you imaging? Who's going to be involved? We can help at all those different stages, but there's not one solution for every different site. It's trying to work out what the optimal situation for that site is with the equipment that they have and with the scenario they're operating in as well. But it's absolutely something for the whole team. It's not just a thing for the vets to do or just a thing for the nurses to do. Everybody needs to be involved in it, and we like to be able to get into every part of that chain.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. I'm going to throw a question over to Marie. What kind of lessons can be learned in veterinary practices from human diagnostic imaging when it comes to things like consistency, efficiency, and outcomes? What can be learned from human diagnostics?
Yeah, I think there are quite a few things that can be gained from diagnostics in sort of the medical side. Very much like Sam said, there will be more of a standardized process. Often we have the benefit that obviously, the patient can explain where their pain is. So there's a big difference in that perspective. So as well as, the patient and the examination being quite standardized, which you might not obviously get, I think there's still parts from the sort of quality control and making sure that when you have, and we've listened as a company hopefully and provided you equipment, the next step would probably be getting the most out of that equipment, which is where I think medical ultrasound and x-ray and all the imaging really provides gains for. So in terms of the medical world, there will be a return on investment if it's within the NHS. That might obviously not be a monetary value, but it could be time. All of these things still, I think, apply as lessons that could be learnt from the sort of veterinary practice to make sure that the equipment that you do seek and that is right for your particular practice is used to its maximum. So it goes back to some of the sort of pain points that Amy had mentioned, where, providing maybe we can provide standard workflows from placing a patient on the equipment through to the saving images. So those sort of things would be very sought after within sort of the medical imaging audits and processes. And then in terms of how IMV can help with bridging that knowledge of the medical ultrasound and providing or x-ray or whatever equipment you have and providing that to your specific practice. In terms of the sort of equipment that you have, we can make sure that the return on investment from the number of scans that you provide, is there someone specific that can look at the quality as well and be assigned to do that, and make sure that if there is like a common question that you have that we can answer. And I think it was Hannah that said earlier that we, from us going out and about, we do come across the weird and the wonderful. And that means that we're there as sort of a partner in crime, for want of a better term, that we can then provide answers to something that you might be stuck on with your imaging. Or equally, see what we can do from questions that are already existing. And certainly Amy and Sam, as part of the clinical team, have mentioned just even this year that we're getting a lot of feedback from customers to change our future courses to make sure if there's something that's commonly coming up that we cover that from the various resources that we have. So although obviously the practice will be different from the way that it might not be quite as standardized or will never be standardized, and practices will change from place to place and patients will change from place to place more than the medical world comes across. I think there's some things to gain from looking at the workflow, the sort of personnel that you have, and then any sort of pain points and questions that we can gain, and information that we can build up. Because certainly, within the medical world with imaging, there's a host of information held internally, and this is again where IMV can sort of help.
Amazing. Thank you, Marie. We've got time for one more question, which I'm going to throw over to Hannah. What's possible right now with imaging? We think about the future all the time and how technology will change, but what are some things that can be done right now that people might not be aware of?
It might sound very simple, but even like the size and shape and the portability of equipment. It wasn't so long ago when if you wanted to x-ray a horse in the middle of a field with a suspected broken leg, say, that you'd be having to try and work out how to transport them safely to somewhere where you had electricity to kind of perform diagnostic imaging. Now I could walk out of here with essentially like a nice little shoulder bag, a kind of a little box to my side with a generator in, and I could go and x-ray in the middle of a field with no kind of electricity, battery powered, lightweight. We have probes now that kind of connect to mobile phones that you can use, and that mobile phone can then send those images to different professionals all over the world straight away. So from like even just the kind of the size and portability of equipment, the modernization of technology is already there, as well as like what that equipment can do has definitely also improved too. So the very small silver lining, well, a silver lining from a rising obesity endemic in the human world has actually helped us, and they've improved their probe technology in ultrasound, which means we can now scan the abdomens of horses a lot better, or very large dogs. So that's kind of technology development we have access to right now. And again, it's kind of going back to kind of what Sam, Amy, and Marie have all kind of said. It's we have the expertise to help apply those technology kind of advancements in our vet world in our special way, where we can then help practices really say it further improve that patient care. What we can do now to help patients it does rival kind of in the human world. We have species specialists, we have discipline specialists within that as well. And again, we can help apply the right technology in the right way to kind of improve their diagnostic imaging kind of further. Definitely that sharing of images technology is now, like, I actually probably would stand by the biggest technology advancement in the vet world was actually one of these, was the mobile phone. We no longer have to be stood next to a landline or anything like that. And now you can share images, you can optimize images, you can add different kind of post-processing onto using your phone. But that sharing those images, further strengthening that veterinary community, both from imaging specialists or knowledge specialists, I think that's already here. Are we making the most of it as well? I think that would be another thing. Collaboration, I think, is at the core of a lot of our veterinary professionals, and sharing images is a key way to do that. And also the AI word again, it's already here. It is quite scary, potentially, though there isn't that confidence in it, that knowledge of it. But it is already being used. Sam made a nod towards in our general working life, but also actually in specifically kind of imaging as such as well. And we are very, very, integrity is one of our values. Like, I think it's just a steadfast of any of us working particularly in this profession, but that we need to be developing it in a responsible manner. And for us, like, educating in kind of AI, so people have the basic core foundations on which to build, particularly because this technology is already here. We are born from, our business was born from developing ultrasound machines for cattle, and we actually already use AI in that. But there's lots of different types of AI. That's a very broad spectrum term. We've kind of developed something called Vovitel, which helps people identify different structures in the bovine kind of reproductive tract as they're kind of scanning, but it's all been kind of veterinary taught. So again, this is another bit where coming and partnering and helping us increase that confidence, that knowledge base in these technologies that are here and evolving is incredibly important to us. And where it's going to go, we deal with a lot of large data sets when we're working at patients, be that diagnostic lists, be that kind of different images, be that, different kind of lab work and things like that. It's looking at how we look to the future and combine all that information to help this AI kind of help us further improve that patient care, not taking people's jobs away or anything like that. But we do know as a profession, we have incredible kind of pressures on our time and being able to give the best service and the best care. And actually, how do we utilize technology to help that so we can continue kind of to evolve and get better and improve animal health and welfare, really.
Thank you, Hannah. And thank you to Marie, Amy, and Sam as well. It's been fascinating speaking with you. I've learned so much, and I'm sure all of the listeners and viewers will have taken some amazing insights away from today as well. So please do head on over to the Lurnex platform. We have some reflection questions based on this session for you to go through. You can earn your certificate of attendance for CPD. And thanks so much for the team at IMV for joining today. We'll see you on the inside.